Well, hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we've got another children's toy. Well, earlier on the show, we made that flatbed truck and it received a wonderful response. Everybody was pleased with it. Everyone seemed to enjoy it, and I sent out a ton of those patterns. So I thought I would continue with this and kind of do a little construction series here. So today we're going to do a skid steer. Call it a skid steer, call it a bobcat, whatever you want to call it, that's what we're going to make. And it all starts off with some 1/2 inch thick walnut over at the bench. Well, here we have the pattern that I've come up with for this toy, and I want to start with the wheels. Now, these wheels are 1/2 inch thick, which are a little wider than the wheels I normally put on the toys. I don't use the patterns for these. I need 4 of these wheels. These are actually 3/4 inch in diameter, which are also smaller than I normally make. But what we're going to do is I'm going to draw these out on here by using my Incra rule first off to get a center line on the wheels. We will mark them and draw them out with a circle template. We will drill out the 1/4 inch axle hole on each one of the 4 wheels and then cut them out over at the scroll saw. From there, I'm going to mount them up on a pen mandrel and then sand them till they're all perfectly round and perfectly the same size. This will do 2 things. This will make it so that the center hole for the axle is centered perfectly, and as well it will make them all the same size and perfectly round so that they roll really well. So get these 4 wheels made and then we can carry on from there. Well, the next piece that we want to make will be the chassis of the skid steer. Now, this process, when you're going to use the pattern, is the same across the board, so I only need to show you the once. What we're going to do is this one here is cut out of 3/4 inch thick material. I'm going to use poplar. The first thing that we want to do is we want to coat our stock with masking tape. Now what this does is it makes it that there will be no glue residue left when we attach our pattern. So the pattern will be cut out, sprayed on the back with spray adhesive. We're going to allow that to sit for 3 minutes to allow it to tack up. Once it's tacked up, we will rub it down on top of the masking tape, and the first thing we want to do here with this piece is drill our axle holes, which are 5/16 in diameter. From there, we can just install a number 7 reverse tooth blade in the scroll saw, and we can cut this piece out. And with that chassis cut, we can now apply our wheels. So just like the pattern says, we're going to need, well, eventually 4 lengths of 1/4 inch dowel, 2 inches long, but for now we just need 2 of them. And we're just going to place a length of dowel in one of our 5/16 holes. We will glue on our wheels. We will leave them so that there is about 1/8 inch protruding from each wheel, centered on there, and we will glue them in place. We'll do that for both of our axle holes, and once we get them glued and let them completely set up and dry, then you should have the base for your skid steer. Isn't that cute? Look at that. That's almost fun just playing with it just by itself. Okay, video's over. Toy's done. Guys, glue up your wheels and put it aside, let it dry, and we'll work on the other pieces while we're waiting for those wheels to dry. Well, the next thing that we're going to make will be the scoop sides or the bucket sides. Now, these have to be identical with holes placed exactly in the same spot. Otherwise, it won't work properly. So we're going to stack cut them. So I have here 2 pieces of walnut. They're about 1.5 inches wide. They're about 5.5 inches long and 1/4 inch thick. So we're going to use masking tape, tape these together, attach our pattern, and then we're going to cut them both out at the same time after we've drilled our 1/4 inch diameter holes. Now, one thing that I will point out is this piece here, the arm of the bucket, is kind of fragile. So you want to place it on your stock in such a way to get the long grain running along the whole length of this thing. Don't do it like this. That will make this extremely fragile, and it'll make these pieces here extremely breakable. So you want to kind of angle it like this so that your grain runs along the whole length of the piece. That'll go a long way to making it more playable. Now you can see here, this is a blade entry hole, and I've cut these out. The reason I did that as an interior cut is it keeps your entire assembly of both the pieces together. It keeps them tight. If you cut into the one side and then start cutting around, you've now compromised this block that you've taped together. So here we go. We have both of these pieces now cut, and we now need two more pieces to form the bucket. And what those pieces are the back section and the bottom. Now on the pattern, it shows the bottom as a taper at one end. It's much easier to sand that after the bucket is glued together. So what you want to do here is, these pieces here are 1 1/4 inch wide each. So you will take that 1 1/4 inch side, we're going to line up the back piece with the back wall, and then this will get glued together just like this. And in the end of it there, you'll have a cute little bucket, just like that. So there you go. We will glue these together like this. And once they're dry, we're going to come back and deal with this end piece here to get that angle. Well, while we're waiting for this to dry, we can now put it aside. You may notice the dowels in there. Those are the other 2 1/4 inch dowels that are cut, and I've just used them to help me with alignment, that's all. So the next pieces, while we're waiting for that to dry, we're going to work on the cabin of the vehicle. Now you might see that there are 3 pieces here. You need 2 of these cabin walls and 1 of the cabin core. And you may also see that each one of them has a 9/32 diameter hole in it. Do not drill those holes. We will drill them after the cabin is all put together because they all need to line up perfectly. Better to drill them all at once. So what I've done is I have cut, just like I like to do, I have cut a template of our cabin walls, and I have some 1/4 inch thick poplar here, and I'm going to mark these out and cut them over at the scroll saw. We also need to cut the core. So I have a piece of 3/4 inch poplar, and what you can do, instead of following the pattern like what I've got here, you can follow the pattern if you want. I show this little skinny piece. What I've done is I've drawn a line on my template which coincides with the width of this cabin core. And then all you need to do, if you have a 3/4 inch thick piece of poplar, you can line that line up with the end of your stock once you've squared it off, and you can draw, using your template, that piece. What I would suggest is cutting this just outside of the line, and then we can sand them once the whole thing is glued together. But for starters, let's get this cut out. Now to cut the sides, I used a number 3 blade. I've changed to a number 7 to cut this core. And as I said previously, we're just going to cut just outside the lines. Well, we can now glue our cabin together, and I have a few things to assist me. I have a straight edge over here, and I have a square clamped to that straight edge. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to apply glue to both sides of our core And that line that we drew, that we cut to the outside of, that will be our alignment line. So we'll place some glue on each side here. There we go. And using that alignment line, we will clamp this in place. Now the square is just going to help us get everything neatly lined up. So we're going to line up the front edges of our cab. There we go, line it up with the square. And just like that. Now we're going to clean up our squeeze out and we will let this set up. Now in the meantime, while waiting for that to dry, we can turn our attention back to our scoop. I've cut off most of the excess of that bottom piece with the scroll saw, and now I've just got a piece of sandpaper here that is glued to a piece of MDF, and we can just use that to sand that angle that I spoke of earlier. Instead of trying to cut it and getting them to match, this is a much easier way to get them perfectly aligned. So just continue sanding this until you get the angle of your base piece to be equal with the angle of your sides of your scoop. And once you get that sanded flush, you'll end up with quite the sharp point here. I would suggest sanding that off. Just rounding it over a little bit by hand. We don't want those sharp edges on a child's toy because, of course, as a lot of you know from experience, those sharp edges cut, and they cut really quickly. So, as much as it's not conducive to scooping small items, sand that point off. Alright, and once that's done, you should have a scoop that looks a little like that. Isn't that cute? Check that out. Okay, put that aside. Turn your attention now back to your cab, and what we're going to do is I'm going to take this over to the belt sander and I'm going to even up all of these back edges here, the one that we cut a little proud. Once we get that done, it'll make it all nice and even and give it a little more of a professional look. And with that done, it's now time to test our scoop with our cab. Now, truth be told, I had to take this over to my sandpaper on MDF and sand down the sides just a touch because you want this bucket assembly to fit over top of your cabin. It doesn't need to be tight. A little bit of friction between the two, hear that? But not a lot. You don't want this to be tight because a child's going to be playing with it. They don't want to have to really crank on it to get it up. So you want to make sure that it's got a little bit of friction, but it's not super tight. I mean, only you can judge how it is that you want this action to work on yours. Okay, so with that being done, now we can glue the roof on our cab. And the roof is a simple little piece of 1/8 inch thick stock. It is the same width as what our cab is. Oh, I see that mine is a little wider than the cab. That's not going to work because that's going to interfere with our bucket mechanism. So what I'm going to do is I will glue that on there where I want it. You want a little bit of an overhang at the front, just a touch, and at the back we're going to end up sanding it to this same profile. So we're going to glue this in place. Once it's dry, we're going to sand it flush over at our sandpaper on the MDF, and then we will sand this section off here over at the sander to make all of this line up nice and purdy, and then give it a good sanding, and then we're going to head over to the drill press. And now at this point, it's time to drill our 9/32 diameter hole. So line up your drill bit as best you can and drill it right through all of your cabin pieces. We now need to glue our scoop or our bucket onto our cabin, and we have those other 2 1/4-inch diameter by 2-inch long dowels. And essentially your top holes in your scoop handle, that is nothing more than a handle to allow the child to have something to hold on to make the scoop work. The other one is the hinge point, and that will align with the hole that you put in your cabin, and your 1/4-inch dowel will slide through there and out the other side, and it will get glued into your frame of your scoop, just like that. So we can glue both of these dowels in. You leave about 1/8 of an inch protruding on the outside, just like we always did. If your dowels are a little off and the 1/8 doesn't work, just center them on there so that they look right. And that is your scoop assembly finished. Once you get that all glued together and things are dried up, we can do the final piece and the final assembly of our skid steer. Well, the last piece to make for our skid steer is the chassis top. And this also ends up being the base for our cabin. So the way this gets glued together, you just cut it to dimension. It's 1 3/4 inches wide, and it's 2.5 inches long, 1/8 of an inch thick. You will line it up with the bottom. Your front edge will line up with the front edge of your cabin, and with the bucket lowered, the edges of that base will line up with the edges of your bucket, just like that. That will help you line everything up just while you're waiting for it to dry. And when you clamp it together, make sure you get the bucket up out of the way so that you don't glue it to your base. You don't want that squeeze out to screw things up for you. So line that up, glue it in place, and from there we can glue this onto our chassis. And with that assembly all done, we can now glue it to our chassis that we made earlier. And essentially the front edge of our chassis top lines up with the front edge of our chassis, and the outer edge of our platform here, the chassis top, lines up with our wheels. So it's as simple as that. You don't even really have to do any measuring. Just line it up with the edges of your wheels and with the front, glue it together and let it dry. And once everything is dry, give all of your sharp edges a sanding to make it a little more playable for the child. You wouldn't want them to get poked or cut, but check that out. Look at that. Isn't that adorable? A little skid steer. I don't know, man. I think any child would be happy to play with that. And there you have it. A mini skid steer or bobcat. What it is, guys, is awesome. This little project, I just love this thing. I am really smitten with this, and it's easy to see why. Number one, a fantastic way to use up scrap stock. I made this entire thing pretty much with offcuts and smaller pieces of wood that were from other projects, whether it be model builds or furniture or whatever I was building. The majority of this toy and most of the toys here on the show are made with scrap wood, so it's a fantastic way to use up your scrap stock. Also, it's a fantastic way to get your children involved in woodworking, whether it be helping to glue it together. If they're a little older, maybe they could make one themselves depending on their age and their ability. With a little bit of help from mommy or daddy, there's no reason why these children can't get out into the shop and learn a skill set, because that's what woodworking is. This isn't about making little cute crafts. This is about learning a skill set, because the stuff that they learn here in the shop will carry on with them for years and years and years. Something as simple as coming out to the shop and hammering a nail into a board will teach them when they're older how to drive a nail into a wall to hang a picture. It carries on. It's not that they necessarily will be making things forever, but that's that skill set that they carry through life. And it all starts with mommy or daddy out here in the shop grandma and grandpa, whoever you are that are bringing the little ones in. So that makes it awesome as well, that we're getting the young ones involved, because, oh my gosh, why wouldn't you? What little one wouldn't want to build this? What little one wouldn't want to play with this? Guys, this is absolutely fantastic. Whether you call it a bobcat, whether you call it a skid steer, it doesn't matter. What I call it is awesome. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. This one has been a load of fun. There's something very satisfying for me when I design a toy on a computer, on paper, and then I come out here on the show and I build it for the very first time, and it works out as fantastically as what this one did. Always on the show, it's the maiden voyage of these things. This is the first time they were ever built, so it's always it's exciting for me to see them come together and to see them work so well and look so great. So here's the deal. Once again, with all the toys that I do in these toy series, if you are interested in getting a copy of this PDF for the plans for this little skid steer, not a problem. Shoot me a message on the channel's Facebook page, or you can drop me an email at the channel's email address, acutAboveUnderscoreWoodworking@hotmail.com. I would be more than happy to send it along. I don't want anything for it. I don't want any money. I don't want any of that. I just want you to have fun with it. Get the little ones involved and make these things. That's what I want. That's my payment, and that's why I make them. I make them to share. Guys, if you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. I mean, we have a load of fun every Tuesday and Friday. You'd be doing yourself a great service to subscribe and becoming a part of that audience, because we honestly do have a great variety of projects here on the show. Once again, guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you've enjoyed the content. I hope that you're going to get those little ones out into the shop and make one of these skid steers, because it's spectacular. And more importantly, I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.